Japanese history is filled with emperors, samurai, and epic battles. But one word appears again and again: shogunate. What exactly was the shogunate? Konnichiwa. Welcome to another journey into the history of Japan. In this video, we'll discover what shogunate means, its origins, evolution, and eventual downfall. First, let's take a look at the etymology of the word shogunate. While the English word shogunate is a hybrid term combining the word shogun with the suffix ate, the original Japanese word for the shogunate is bakufu, literally tent government. This is in reference to the portable commander's post on the battlefield. The word bakufu, or the tent government, testifies to its military nature. The word came to mean the government of the shogun in feudal Japan. Japan had three shogunates in its history: the Kamakura, the Ashikaga, and the Tokugawa Shogunates. Although the three shogunates differed in structure depending on the historical background and political situation, they had following characteristics in common. First, it was a military government that was administered by samurai, or the warriors. Secondly, it had a shogun at the very top. A shogun was a hereditary military dictator. Thirdly, shogun and his vassals were bounded by a master-servant relationship known as go-on and hoko. Go-on referred to granting new land rights and confirming existing holdings by the shogun, and hoko, the loyalty and military service by the vassal in return. This was extremely important because to the samurai in feudal Japan, securing land right was more important than life itself. In the Kamakura period, the phrase issho kenmei captured the essence of a samurai's life. It meant risking everything: his sword, his honor, even his life, for the land he was entrusted with. Last but not least, they coexisted with the emperors and their governments in Kyoto. No shogun ever dared abolish the imperial system because they needed to be appointed by the emperor to obtain legitimacy. This does not mean that the emperors and shoguns always maintained a good relationship. Some emperors, like Gotoba in the Kamakura period, openly challenged the shogunate in an attempt to restore imperial power. However, such attempts ended up thwarted in one way or another by samurai, sometimes through military pressure and sometimes through political appeasement. Next, let's explore how each shogunate was born, evolved, and perished. The country's first shogunate was the Kamakura Shogunate, founded by Minamoto no Yoritomo in 1185. Yoritomo chose Kamakura as the seat of his government because he had his power base there. But what motivated Yoritomo to create a new government when Japan already had an imperial government in Kyoto? It all started with the dissatisfaction of the samurai in eastern province with the nobility in Kyoto. The nobility in Kyoto exploited the samurai by heavily taxing them and mobilizing them for war, offering them poor reward. The samurai were considered to be subservient to the aristocrats in Kyoto. They yearned to be liberated from the constraints and exploitation imposed by the nobility. In the mid to late Heian period, a series of large-scale rebellions erupted in the provinces, and the power struggles among the nobility intensified in Kyoto. The emperors and aristocrats increasingly became dependent on samurai's military might to solve these problems, which gave them a greater say in the politics. During the final phase of the Heian period, the decisive Genpei War was fought between the two prestigious military houses, the Minamoto and the Taira. it was the Minamoto, headed by Yoritomo, who emerged victorious. Backed by his powerful military force, Yoritomo pressured the emperor into granting him the right to appoint Shugo, the military governor, and Jito, the stewards, in charge of managing lands and collecting tax in each province in 1185. This effectively marked the establishment of the new military government with a national network of military, policing, and tax collection authority. In 1192, Yoritomo further had the emperor appoint him as the Sei-Itai shogun, a title commonly known as the shogun. With this title, the shogunate came into being in both name and reality. The samurai in the eastern provinces finally realized their long-held desire to establish a government of the samurai, by the samurai, and for the samurai. Yoritomo was succeeded by his sons, but his legitimate line ended with Sanetomo, the third shogun, who bore no sons. Then, the real power shifted to the Hojo clan, the family of Yoritomo's wife, Masako. Hojo Tokimasa and his descendants would dominate the government as shikken, or regent. Titular shoguns were received first from the prestigious Fujiwara clan, then from the imperial house, but they were given absolutely no power. So under Hojo's regency government, they had titular shoguns appointed by titular emperors, with the real power wielded by the Hojo clan. The Kamakura Shogunate is known to have fought and repelled the Mongolian invasions, but over time, discontent grew among the samurai against the Hojo's dominance of power. And ambitious Emperor Go-Daigo sought to restore power to the emperor. He called on the samurai across the country to overthrow the shogunate. Among the first to respond was Kusunoki Masashige, a master of guerrilla warfare, who raised an army against the shogunate in Kawachi province, modern-day Osaka. And the betrayal of the shogunate's vassals followed. Ashikaga Takauji attacked the shogunate's outpost in Kyoto, while Nitta Yoshisada stormed the shogunate's headquarters in Kamakura, destroying the Hojo clan. This brought an end to the Kamakura Shogunate, a century and a half after its establishment. But the country's first military government became the prototype for subsequent shogunates, setting the foundation for the future of Japanese governance. Next came the Ashikaga Shogunate, also known as the Muromachi Shogunate, because the shogunate's palace was located in the Muromachi district in Kyoto. The Ashikaga Shogunate was established by Ashikaga Takauji in 1336. In contrast to Yoritomo, who chose Kamakura, Takauji's choice was Kyoto, closer to the imperial court. The Ashikaga Shogunate reached its zenith during the rule of the third shogun, Yoshimitsu. Yoshimitsu subjugated rival warlords with his military prowess and amassed a vast fortune through trade with Ming China. He built the world-famous Kinkakuji Temple, or the Gold Pavilion in Kyoto, which testifies to the power and wealth of Yoshimitsu. But the golden age of the Ashikaga Shogunate was short-lived. His successors lacked the charisma and leadership qualities of Yoshimitsu. Their political incompetence led to the 10-year Onin War, which devastated the capital of Kyoto. That in turn threw the country into the chaotic Sengoku period. For over a century, the country experienced incessant civil wars, with the daimyo across the country fighting each other to protect and expand their territories. The shogunate became powerless, but continued to exist in name in the turmoil of Sengoku. But the shogunate met its demise in 1573, when Oda Nobunaga, the first unifier of Japan, expelled the 15th shogun Yoshiaki from Kyoto. Despite the turmoil, it was also a period when much of the Japanese art we know today witnessed great growth under the strong influence of Zen Buddhism. No drama, inkwash painting, and tea ceremony, they all developed in this period. And came the final and the most powerful one, Tokugawa Shogunate. Tokugawa Ieyasu triumphed over his rivals in the Battle of Sekigahara in 1600, establishing national dominance. Ieyasu founded Tokugawa Shogunate, also known as Edo Shogunate, named after the shogunate's capital of Edo, which is today's Tokyo, in 1603. For over 2 centuries and a half, the Tokugawa Shogunate maintained peace and order, referred to as Pax Tokugawana, in stark contrast to the previous chaotic Sengoku period. Ieyasu and his successors cleverly devised schemes to control daimyo and prevent wars and rebellions. They classified the daimyo into 3 categories depending on the degree of loyalty. They located Shinpan and Fudai, the loyal daimyo, in key locations around Edo, Kyoto, and along the main highways, while placing Tozama, or not-so-loyal daimyo, in remote provinces to prevent rebellions. Daimyo were monitored through the Sankin Kotai system, requiring them to alternate residence between their domains and Edo every other year. In addition, they were required to keep their legal wives and children permanently in Edo to serve as hostages. The shogunate also introduced various measures to control the general public, such as a rigorous class system that strictly separated the samurai from non-samurai classes. Only the samurai were allowed to carry swords and use surnames. They banned Christianity, and suspected Christians were ordered to step on Christian images. If they refused, they were tortured or executed. They imposed a national isolation policy known as sakoku, which literally means the chained country. The shogunate also required the emperors to dedicate themselves in learning and art. In other words, the emperors were prohibited from getting involved in politics. These measures were instrumental in preventing wars and rebellions, except for occasional peasant uprisings. Under long-lasting peace, rice harvest increased thanks to advances in agricultural technology, industries flourished, and popular culture entered its golden age. However, 250 years after Sekigahara, an incident threw the country into panic that led to the collapse of the shogunate. Perry's arrival. The U.S. naval fleet under Commodore Matthew Perry appeared at the mouth of Edo Bay and demanded opening of Japanese ports. The shogunate was helpless in the face of U.S. gunboat diplomacy and succumbed to their demands. Its weak-kneed diplomacy infuriated many samurai nationwide, triggering anti-shogunate movement. The shogunate initially cracked down on dissident samurai and intellectuals. However, their authority gradually eroded in the face of mounting pressure, in particular from Choshu and Satsuma domains. As the momentum for overthrowing the shogunate grew, the 15th shogun, Tokugawa Yoshinobu, decided to give up the continuation of the shogunate and to return the governing power to the emperor in 1867. This brought an end to the Tokugawa Shogunate and 7 centuries of samurai rule, and marked the start of the modernization, industrialization, and westernization of Japan, known as the Meiji Restoration. The significance of the shogunate for the later generations is profound, politically, culturally, and socially. Each of the 3 shogunates shaped Japan's trajectory in distinct ways, leaving legacies that continue to influence modern Japan. Thank you for watching. If you found the journey into the history of Japan's unique military government fascinating, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below. ありがとうございました。さようなら。